Today, we're taking a deep dive into the topic of music. More specifically, perhaps, the relationship many modern men have with music. This is the second video on male emotion that I'm making. If you haven't seen the first one, it's going to be linked somewhere up here right now. Go ahead and check it out first. In the first video, I talk more generally about the relationship between masculinity and emotion, how a complete man, as I would call him, should act in terms of emotionality, what his relationship to emotion should be. And in this video and the videos following this one, I'm going to talk about things that affect your emotional state, both in the moment and more generally, sort of your base emotional state that you go through life with. Why am I talking about music? I think some people who might have watched the first video already and heard me announce this topic at the end were a little bit surprised, perhaps. Music is something almost everyone in the modern world consumes, and consumes a lot, in fact. Many, if not most people, listen to music almost constantly. And because of this fact, many people are not quite aware of the effects music is having on their emotional state and on their ability to interact with the world and make decisions in general. So I'm going to go through this topic sort of step by step, and each step is going to get a little bit deeper into the topic. We're going to start at a very surface level and then work our way down into the depths that is music and its effects on you as we go along. So let's start with the surface, right? Let's start with step number one, level one. Music with lyrics. As most of you are probably aware, there has been a long-standing debate on the effects of certain types of music, certain genres of music, on the human brain, the human psyche, the way people behave. And most people like to disregard statements like, oh, this type of music makes you more aggressive or makes you more violent, etc. The same way you have that same discussion regarding other types of media, movies, TV shows, video games would obviously be the most recent one. And I think it makes sense to first look at the lyrics of the music you're listening to, because they are a very sort of direct form of communication. You've actually got someone talking to you, if you will. Let's say you're listening to a rap song, and the guy in the lyrics is talking about killing people. He's talking about taking drugs, having sex with a lot of different women, perhaps not the kind of women you might actually want to be having sex with. Perhaps they are visually attractive, but kind of skanky. Is that going to have an effect on you? You might say no, right? Your surface level, sort of purely rational mind is saying, no, I know it's just a song. That doesn't have an effect on me. Really? See, one of the things that has a huge effect on our personality is our social surroundings. Okay, so the way people behave around us. Both consciously and subconsciously, we are watching these people, and they form our understanding of how you behave. How a man behaves, how a woman behaves, how someone in a certain profession behaves, how a father behaves, etc. We form these perceptions based on the people in our social vicinity. Now, can we, to an extent, disconnect ourselves from this immediate perception? Yes, sure. We can rationalize that certain behaviors are not good, should be avoided, etc. But if we keep being around these people, subconsciously, we are still consuming that information. Let's put it like that. Now, you might say on a conscious level, if I address this topic to you, I know these things are bad or they're bad for me specifically. I wouldn't do these things just because I listen to the music. Okay, maybe. And maybe that is actually true. Maybe you won't do those things. But you might glorify those things subconsciously because you're not talking to me consciously, rationally about the lyrics of this one song when you're listening to it. What you're doing is constantly listening to the lyrics of this song. And in many cases, people just listen to music in the background. So you're not even actively listening to the lyrics. You're just letting them play. They are sort of background noise, background conversation. They're still being picked up by your ears. Your subconscious is still consuming at least some, if not all, of that verbal information. You're just not thinking about it. But in your mind, this will potentially, and I think there's a very good chance of it, lead to a glorification of this type of behavior. Now, maybe you're not listening to this sort of very clearly degenerate music. Maybe you're listening to the more emotional, sad boy kind of genre of music. The, singer-songwriter is like a term that's thrown around a lot. The sad guy with his acoustic guitar type of deal. Ed Sheeran is maybe a very famous example of this general direction. And this is a guy who is not super aggressive, which in and of itself I don't think is a bad thing. I think aggression as a man is very important. The question is, do you want to listen to another guy being aggressive and talking about degenerate shit? I would say no. But this singer-songwriter type, it doesn't have to be that specifically. There are other types of this emo music as well. But it's usually a guy who is kind of emotional, kind of sad, melancholic, a little bit depressed in that sort of, deep kind of way. And he sings about the hardships of the world. He sings about this girl who he's in love with, but she left him, or um, she isn't giving that love back, or whatever. And you might say, okay, this type of music, this can't be bad for me, right? This guy isn't singing about degenerate shit. That depends on how you look at it, to be honest. It really does. I mean, think about it. Is that what you want to be? Do you want to be some sad sap who goes through life feeling depressed and sad and anxious about everything? Moaning about shit? If you are, I would kindly ask you to click off this video right now and leave this channel, because I am genuinely unsure what you are doing here. If you want to do something with your life, if you want to go places, if fundamentally you have that drive inside you and you feel like outside factors, the modern world, is kind of keeping you from becoming that ferocious barbarian who seeks to grow, who seeks to explore and conquer and strive to become excellent. Do you want this kind of energy? Do you want to consume copious amounts of lyrics? Because again, and we're going to address that in a moment here, you're listening to this a lot in the background, sort of subconsciously, right? The way you're sort of subconsciously perceiving the people in your social circle, in your social life. Do you want to absorb this kind of mentality, this type of energy towards the world? Absolutely not. What kind of way of looking at the world is this? This music isn't empowering. This music doesn't make you want to do stuff, go out there and win. The rap music maybe does, but the types of ways in which these rappers are winning, quote unquote, not something to really aspire to necessarily. But this music doesn't even make you aspire to anything at all, really. It just makes you sad and depressed and emotional. And here's the thing, these singers you are listening to, they can at least sing. Their game when it comes to women, right? Finding a partner, or probably in their case, having sex with a lot of different women, is being that kind of sad sap, okay? It's almost a sort of pity game where women are like, oh, look at this guy, he's so emotional, he's so sad and broken. But then at the same time, he can still play the guitar really well, and he has a nice voice. So he is talented in some area, and they feel like, oh, I can lift him up, I can be there for him, etc. Is that you? If you're picking up these kind of vibes, right? If you're becoming some sad sap, but you're not even a famous singer, you think people are just gonna like you out of like maximum pity? There's nothing redeemable there? You're just a sad guy? Like, I mean, not to be mean here or anything, but who the fuck would want to be around you? Now, obviously, if you listen to loads of different kinds of music, and we're also going to get to that in a minute, you're not necessarily just going to be the sad guy. But what I'm saying here is you don't want to be absorbing these types of vibes as a man. That's not something you need in your life. You don't need to be more sad. You don't need to be more depressed. How does that do anything for you? There are other types of music, though. There is uplifting music. There's music that hypes you up without having really degenerate lyrics. Okay? This is where we get maybe to the second level, which is less about specific lyrics, and it is more about the habit of listening to music with lyrics in general. See, what most people do is not sit down and listen to and really appreciate a song. I think music can be appreciated as an art form, the way you can appreciate a nice painting, a good movie, etc. The question is, what type of music are you constantly engaging with? If you think about the examples I just gave, let's say a painting, you can appreciate the sort of sad beauty of a painting, on a purely artistic level. You go to a museum, right? And you look at this painting. And maybe you look at it for a while and you really appreciate the way it has been painted, the craft, the skill of the artist, the emotion that is captured in the painting. Sure. Is that something you do every day? No. Or not even just every day. Is that something you do like every hour or two? Of course not. Now, maybe this feels like a silly example to you because it is just logistically implausible that you would go to this museum every hour and look at the painting. Sure, fair enough. What if you had the painting? Let's say you have a painting in the sort of main room of your apartment or house, right? The room where you spend the most time. Would you want a really depressing painting hanging there? I'm not asking you personally what you would want. I'm saying, logically speaking, if you think about this rationally, the room that you spend the most amount of time in your home, let's say you're spending most of your time on average in your office. So the painting is in your office, okay? Would you want a really sad, depressing painting in the place you spend most of your time in? The place where you want to feel, happy and relaxed, or focused and driven, depending on whether we're talking about your living room or maybe your office again? No, obviously not. If you talk about a movie, watching a good movie, if you go watch a movie like once a month, you go to a movie theater, right? You really focus on that movie. You're zoned in, right? It's dark. It's a huge screen, great sound system. That can be a very cool, very special, very worthwhile experience. And sometimes it can, get you thinking, give you a new perspective on something, the way art does, right? Movies can be a very special art form, depending on the type of movie you're watching here. But what if you watch a movie every day? And you stop watching movies consciously, actively thinking about them as well. You start sort of microdosing movies. Maybe you're watching like 2 or 3 movies every day, right? Or like 1 hour episodes of a TV show. And you're now watching them on like your laptop screen while doing something on your phone on the side. Are you actively engaging with this movie as an art form? No. Are you still going to consume some of the vibes of the movie? Yes, you are. And now you're not consuming them while actively thinking about them. You're just kind of subconsciously absorbing what you're watching. Now, with music, if you're constantly listening to music with lyrics, this can actually become very distracting. And the thing is, people are not aware of the fact that it is distracting. I want to tell a little bit of a short story here, because I recently went on a trip with some old friends of mine from school. And yeah, we went on a sort of vacation out in the countryside. And we had one guy with us who constantly wanted to listen to music. Mind you, I didn't even take issue with listening to music at all. But since we were actively doing something together, something that did require a certain level of focus, I said, let's listen to some ambient music, maybe. That's something I could get down with. But this guy constantly wanted to listen to, like, just normal music, 3 minute, 4 minute tracks with lyrics where people are like singing or talking or shouting or rapping, whatever the fuck, right? And it got to the point where I got really annoyed by this guy constantly, turning on this type of music or starting a discussion with me about whether we can listen to this type of music, where I just went, dude, if you want to constantly listen to music in your regular life, no one is stopping you, okay? But I don't want that. I'm not interested in that, okay? And this guy got really pissed off. He had almost like a temper tantrum. And he said something along the lines of, well, you just judge people based on, like, you don't even know the whole story or the whole picture. You just make these judgment calls based on incomplete knowledge. And I went like, is my judgment call wrong here? Do you not constantly listen to music? And he got a little more quiet, to be honest. And he was like, not really. He didn't say that shit with conviction. He knew he was talking out of his fucking ass. The thing is, what is constantly listening to music? If you're listening to music several hours a day, 5, 6, 7 times a day, during different activities, you're listening to music when you're walking somewhere, riding your bike somewhere, driving somewhere. You're listening to music when you're doing your shopping. You're listening to music when you're doing your chores. You're listening to music when you're hanging out with people at the park. You're listening to music maybe even while you're doing some types of work. At that point, what constitutes constantly listening to music? Like, how much music do you have to listen to before you would agree that you're constantly listening to music? I think we don't have to go so far as to have someone who 24/7 is wearing headphones even while he's sleeping. If you're listening to music every single day, multiple times a day, during many, potentially most activities you do in a day, you're constantly listening to music. Okay? And the fact that this guy in that situation even denied that, even wanted to have a discussion about that, when it was obvious that he wanted to listen to music during almost everything we were doing. I'm even getting like a little bit amused thinking back to this situation because it was fucking funny to me. And I said kind of like, I didn't really push the issue any further because it seemed to me quite obvious that the guy was, in the wrong there. And I think it was very obvious to everyone else who was present. But I kind of subtly suggested that perhaps he might be a little bit addicted to music if he's so bothered by the fact that I don't want to listen to music all the time. And I actually wasn't the only guy. There was another guy there who was also quite annoyed by the constant music, and especially music with lyrics. You may think that you can focus while there are lyrics running in the background because you have gotten so used to just constantly listening to music where there's people talking, singing, shouting, rapping, etc., that feels like the default for you. But the fact of the matter is, the thing you've gotten used to is the dopamine, the rush this music gives you. Maybe also the emotional state it puts you in, as I mentioned before, right? The lyrics are still distracting you. That's like people saying, I can watch a movie with 100% attention while also being on my phone. No, you can't. That is a silly proposition. Just because you've gotten used to watching movies while scrolling on Instagram or checking your messages every 3 minutes, just because that's become the default for you, doesn't mean if you actually paid full 100% attention to the movie, it wouldn't be a different experience and you wouldn't end up being more focused if you practice doing that. And I don't think I have to explain, if you actually rationally think about it, that you're going to be more focused on an activity that involves talking to people or reading something, or in the case of a movie, listening to the dialogue, watching what's going on screen, if there's not someone talking in the background or you're reading something on the side. Like, obviously, that is going to subtract from your focus. That there's nothing to explain here, really. But some people have gotten so incredibly addicted to music, and yes, I'm going to use that word, addicted, that the level of almost borderline anxiety, certainly being kind of stressed out, being kind of uncomfortable with the silence, that is not really anything special. That's just the normal state of being when no music is there, when there's no one talking in the background. Some people have gotten so used to this, so addicted to this, that they will actually go down the completely absurd line of reasoning that somehow they are not distracted by music with lyrics running in the background while you're doing something consciously that requires conscious attention. You're talking to other people, you're reading something, etc. As someone who used to listen to a lot of music, I had the same types of habits in this regard as many other people, and who has, to a very, very significant degree, eliminated music in general from his life. I'm going to talk about music in general versus music with lyrics in a moment there. I can tell you that this is complete nonsense. Music is incredibly distracting. Okay, the level of productivity I have reached by not constantly listening to music is beyond anything someone who constantly listens to music could probably ever imagine. So yeah, beyond the specific lyrics you're listening to, just having someone constantly talking in the background, very distracting if you actually want to focus on stuff. Again, maybe you want to appreciate a great piece of music every now and then, the same way you might want to watch a great movie every now and then. But then do that consciously as well. You don't need music on the side. And this is where we go another level deeper, and I've touched on this a little bit already. Beyond lyrics, beyond the emotional vibe a certain type of music gives, because of course, music without lyrics can also convey certain emotions, can also make you sad and depressed. Beyond that, music in general is a stimulant. Music can be a source of dopamine. That's why a lot of people like to listen to music when they go to the gym, when they exercise, right? Oh, I need my exercise mix to get really pumped. Do you actually, though? This is sort of the level that, if I'm being quite honest, most people nowadays have already reached. Where, beyond the two things I just talked about, they are just constantly listening to music, and oftentimes not even a specific genre. They have like a random Spotify playlist with 100 songs in it. And these songs are completely different genres, completely different vibes. And they are sort of microdosing emotional stimulation, right? Oh, a little bit of a sad song here, or a little bit of an aggressive, upbeat song here. Oh, let's have more of a wholesome song, followed by this random, completely disgusting rap song. It's not even about feeling a certain type of vibe anymore at that point. And I'm not saying everyone does this, but I've observed a lot of people doing it. It's about maybe feeling a certain type of vibe for like a very brief moment. Man, the crows are loud today. Wotan watching over me make this video. Anyways, where was I? Right, it's not even about feeling a certain type of vibe, really appreciating a certain song in the moment, consciously listening to that one song, really enjoying it. It's about just constantly listening to music because you need that constant influx of dopamine. Because you have gotten so used to listening to music that you're actually in a deficit when there's no music. So now you're constantly listening to something that is altering your emotional state, certainly, at least to some extent, influencing your emotional state, that is also distracting you, if it's music with lyrics, from consciously focusing really, truly, deeply on what you're doing. And you're doing this all the time. All the time, you're just listening to stuff that is altering your emotional state and distracting you from true deep focus. Maybe even just, if you're not even working, being alone with your thoughts. I'm out in nature here. I came here this morning. It's like, I don't know, 7:30, 8 a.m. maybe. I walked here from home. And so for the first, couple of, first half an hour, first hour maybe of the day, I was completely alone with my thoughts. Now, to a normal human being, that's nothing special. That sounds like the most normal thing in the world. And when I say normal human being, I'm talking about a healthy individual here. To many, if not most, modern people, the idea of being alone with your thoughts consistently, let's say almost every morning, for like an hour, is crazy. Watch these people squirm. Watch these people get so incredibly uncomfortable at the most basic thing in the world. Silence. Not even complete silence. There's still things, right? The crows are cawing, or whatever you call it in English. There's birds chirping. There's bugs whizzing about. If you really listen in, you might hear a car or two in the background. But even if it was completely silent, or almost completely silent, there's nothing fucking wrong with that. And yet most people listen to music so fucking much, at least when they're not watching something or listening to a podcast or whatever the fuck. They constantly need to have some sort of input, right? That keeps that dopamine level up. Maybe they can get that dopamine supply again from something like a podcast instead of music. There are people, by the way, who do listen to music while listening to a podcast. They're going to actively, quote unquote, listen to a podcast while they have some, the stereo or whatever in the background, quietly playing music as well. This is crazy. This is so absurd. And most people are not really in touch with their inner self because they never get the chance to really, truly, deeply reflect without any outside influence. You can't truly deeply reflect, even when you're listening to music that doesn't have any lyrics, because it's still something that is very actively affecting your emotional state. And the majority of people I talk to, I interact with, they have no idea what their values are. They think being tolerant towards everyone is a value. It's not a value. That is you admitting that you have no values and just, saying, oh, you think this? Cool. Oh, you think that? Cool. I don't actually know what I think. They maybe have a surface level opinion on, oh, I like this food. Oh, I, enjoy this singer's music. But on a sort of deep, profound level, they rarely ever get there because they're constantly listening to shit. They're constantly, consuming this this influx of outside information. And when it's not there, when they can't be listening to music constantly, they get really uncomfortable. Again, reminding you of the story I just told, almost like pissy. Like a crack addict who needs his fix. They get really angry, passive aggressive. And it's bizarre to watch once you're on the outside, once you're not someone who constantly listens to music. Witnessing how angry someone can get just because they don't get to listen to music for like 3 days. Actually, scratch that. Not even not listen to music, not listen specifically to the type of music they want to listen to with lyrics. If I say it like this, right? You might be watching this, and you're probably someone who listens to music a lot, if you're a typical modern person. But when I put it like this, do you see how bizarre that sounds? That's the behavior of someone who's addicted. And that's the level we're talking about right now. Beyond specific lyrics, beyond lyrics in general being distracting, influencing your emotional state. Just the act of constantly listening to music, constantly influencing your emotional state in this way. Constantly consuming information through lyrics, perhaps, or at least this emotional influx, depletes your dopamine and actually makes you stressed out and feel like you're less capable of doing stuff when you don't have that influx. I kind of mentioned this on the side in a previous video, but this is where I get so amused when people say, oh, I really love to work out. But then they feel like they just can't hit a good workout without their workout mix and pre-workout and whatever the fuck. If you really love working out, why do you need things that have nothing to do with working out to hit a good workout? I don't listen to music when I work out. Not because music can't give you a push. It can. But if you're constantly listening to music when you're working out, music is not giving you a push. Music has just become a default part of your workout, right? That's your default level of dopamine. And when you don't have the music, you're actually at a deficit. That's the same thing as people constantly drinking coffee. And then they actually feel tired when they're not drinking coffee. Yeah, well, at that point, coffee is not really stimulating you to a significant extent that is actually improving your performance, is it? Coffee has just become a default part of your day-to-day life. And when you don't get your coffee, you're actually in the red, dopamine-wise. So, yeah, if you want to, in general, be more chill, feel less stressed out, feel less anxious, stop constantly listening to shit. Leave your headphones at home and just consciously say, I'm going to walk over here, over there, and I'm just going to think. Or I'm just going to, perceive the world around me. You're automatically going to think about stuff. And you will realize, oh shit, this is actually really normal. Oh shit, I can be alone with my thoughts. And then some people might realize that, oh shit, they should have been alone with their thoughts a long time ago. Because it's actually been ages since they have deeply reflected on fucking anything. And so what ends up happening is these people keep avoiding being alone with their thoughts because they will be confronted with this plethora of things, of impressions, of feelings, etc., that they just feel overwhelmed by. Newsflash, that's you. That's actually you. Okay, beyond the surface level habits you do, beyond the generic things you say when having small talk with people, that's actually you. That's your inner self. Maybe engage with it, because as long as you're not in touch with your inner self, you're never going to have an emotional state that is even remotely balanced. So on a surface level, avoid lyrics, avoid types of music, maybe not just lyrics, also the sort of vibe the music gives off, that put you in a bad emotional or mental state. So music that is very degenerate or very sort of down, depressing, sad, emo type shit. Stay away from that. You just don't need it. And on an emotional level, try to avoid sad, depressing music as well. Focus on listening to music that gets you hyped, that is uplifting, makes you feel victorious or ready to be victorious, ready to explore, conquer, etc. But then, beyond that, no matter the lyrics or genre of music you're listening to, right? Don't be listening to it constantly, because it's actually going to distract you from what you're doing. It's going to influence your default emotional state, and that's not what you want. So you want to appreciate this music at best every now and then. Really consciously, actively listen to it. Maybe imagine something, right? Feel inspired by it. But don't have it running in the background where it's constantly distracting you with the words and these small emotional inputs and whatnot. And then ultimately, avoid ever feeling like you need music in relation to any activity. Even if you're very, very rarely listening to music, or very, very rarely, much more rarely than other people say. Avoid ever feeling like you need music, a certain type of music or music in general, for any given activity. Because beyond the specific, immediate emotional impact, and beyond the specific lyrics, maybe, of music with lyrics, music is a stimulant, and you don't want to deplete your dopamine levels in any unnecessary way. Trust me, this might feel weird to you right now because you're constantly listening to music. And yes, if you're listening to music 5, 6, 7 times a day, several songs in a row, if you're listening to music during many of the activities you do throughout your day, yes, you're constantly listening to music. It might feel weird right now. to do this, to move in this direction. But trust me, once you get off of music, right? Once you're not hooked anymore, once the addiction has subsided, you are going to realize just how hooked you actually were. I'm going to leave it at that because I actually have another video of this series to record. The next video is going to be on the topic of diet. Stay tuned for that. If you enjoyed this video, if you found it interesting, if you learned something and hopefully were inspired to listen to less music and listen to music not as constantly and as subconsciously as you're doing right now, go ahead and leave a like and go down below to the comments if you have any questions about anything I talked about in this video, any suggestions for future videos, or if you just want to push the algorithm a little bit, go ahead and leave a comment as well. And if you want a personalized training program or coaching of some kind, you can hit me up on Instagram in the DMs. Just, holy shit. Fox just ran by like a couple of meters away. Anyways. Goddamn, I think a fucking ant crawled into my shoe. Where was I? Ah, fuck. Little fucker. Okay. If you want to see more videos of mine, go ahead and subscribe. I make videos like these on sort of practical philosophy / health. And I also make videos on fitness, on training. So yeah, if you're interested in those topics, subscribe down below. And if you don't want to miss the next 2 videos on this topic, go ahead and activate the notification bell so you get notifications. I'll leave it at that. See you guys in the next video on the topic of diet. And until then, have a good one.